I declare bankruptcy!
Bears beats Battlestar Galactica.
Depression? Isn't that just a fancy word for feeling bummed out?
Dwight, you ignorant slut! Not only the years we've been at war, but from the moment, as a child, when we realized that the world could be conquered.
Welcome to the Great Scott Podcast, the Office Podcast. That's too many podcasts. I'm your host, Jay Rey. With me is my desk mate, Jacob.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
We are members of the Broken Jars Broadcasting Network. Visit us at brokenjars.xyz for all of our other great shows. How you doing, man?
Good. You know, it's the 4th of July weekend, so long weekend, so that's been nice. We grilled out tonight, got some, ribeyes, just, went to town on that, so that was really nice. It's so much cheaper than going to a restaurant, man. You can buy, all the meat you want for, $16 instead of spending $16 a steak or $20 a steak at a restaurant, so it's really nice.
That's true, and grilling's great. I was just on vacation, as you know, and maybe as our listeners don't know, but we were grilling while we were away. We were getting some corn. We had some deli hot dogs, which I didn't even know delis made hot dogs.
Uh-huh.
They're like fresh hot dogs, burgers. Yeah, it was nice. And if I mess it up, it's not a big deal. Put it back on the grill, chuck it out. It's easy, nice, easy. Yeah, and it's good, man. Grilling's great.
Yeah, I love grilling. We were finally able to have one since we're actually living in a house. If anyone who's listened to 42 knows, we finally have a house, and so we can have a grill, and it's just super. It's so cheap.
Mm-hmm.
Charcoal plus last night we grilled up some bratwurst, cheese filled bratwurst. Yeah, it was $8 for both of us, and we were super full, so it was awesome. But we're not here to talk about grilling. We're here to talk about the NBC show The Office, which we all know and love. And tonight we're covering Season 1, Episodes 3, 4, 5, and 6. So that is Healthcare, The Alliance. There's one more I'm forgetting. Basketball, and Hot Girl. So those are the 4 episodes we're going to be covering tonight. I think there's going to be some interesting stuff, especially because this is where The Office really starts to hit its stride. It feels by the time you get to Basketball, Hot Girl, it feels like The Office.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why don't we get into it? So what did you think about Episode 3, Healthcare, where Dwight gets tasked to pick the company's healthcare plan?
Yeah, you're right. This stretch of episodes definitely starts to feel more like The Office we come to know and love later on. It's also has some good moments where you see Dwight's need to have power, in his little office space thing. The Jim Dwight, what do you call it?
Repartee.
Battle. Yeah. That's definitely hit its peak here. Actually, Healthcare and Alliance, they both kind of focus on that a lot. The Dwight and Jim versus each otherness. Yeah, and then again, it just kind of shows Michael and his supervisors, which is nice because so much of the show is Michael managing the office, right?
Right.
But when Jan is his boss, it's just kind of fun to see him back down a little, he tries to ride his high horse, and then Jan's like, "No, this is how you gotta do your job," and he's like, "Ah, shit."
Yeah, that's something in my notes. A lot of it were about, especially in this episode, where Michael. It really shows who Michael really is, about how he really hates to do his actual job.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to be liked, he wants to be loved, but he hates the part of the job where he doesn't get to be liked or loved,
Right.
So, you see that because he pawns off this really important decision to Dwight, which you should never do. That would, in most companies, that would get you fired. So that's our first check mark for things that would get people fired in the show.
Yep.
And so I think that's really interesting. And plus, you also see a lot of his disdain for Dwight as well, because Dwight wants to impress him so much, right?
Right.
And he just treats Dwight like shit.
Right.
the entire time, because like Jim locks Dwight in his, office workspace,
Right.
and Michael sees it and just like walks into his office, doesn't do anything to help.
Doesn't even care. Yeah.
Doesn't even care. So I think it's a really interesting dynamic because it's also we're building up to hating Dwight, because I remember watching the show for the first time. I just hated Dwight until one particular episode. It was the piss test episode. I don't.
Oh, drug testing. I think it's called.
Drug testing. Yeah. And so like I hated Dwight until then, and then you're like, wow, no, I don't hate Dwight. I hate Michael. Michael's a douche, like hardcore.
Yeah, maybe I forget the order, but the fight I think is that season also, and that's where Dwight and Michael go to Dwight's dojo to have like a
That would
little.
be season 2. Then I can never remember if drug testing is season 2 or season 3.
Yeah, and but again, yeah, you're right. Michael is like being like a bit of a dick. He can't like have Dwight have this thing. He has to, he always tries to keep him down because he likes Dwight as a number 2 or whatever number he sees him as. But the instance that like as soon as Dwight starts to elevate, Michael's got to like put him back down.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the shittiness of Michael. This episode was written by Paul Lieberstein.
Which is AKA Toby.
Yeah, and we talked about it last episode, but a lot of the staff, or rather the cast of The Office, write a lot of these episodes. So,
And that's why I think it's season 5. A lot of them stop writing. Like they get, or it's not they stop writing, but they get more writers.
right.
And
Yeah.
so that's why like the feel of the show kind of changes after that episode.
Yeah, I mean, some of them start to direct some episodes, which might affect that. And then some of them, too, probably start getting other work also.
Right.
Yeah, like, starting in movies or whatever. Yeah.
One thing I found funny about this episode is, because Jim's talking about it, like, if I were to move any higher in this company, it would be my career. And I'm just like, oh, young Jim, so naive. You're going to be here for another 9 years.
So speaking of Dwight's workspace, which is called Dwight Schrute Workspace.
Right. Which is the
in-
conference room.
Yeah. In the that's right. And there's that like funny bit where he's like, "My office is bigger yours," and then there's just like that nice early office awkwardness where it's like a wide shot of the two of them, and like Michael's like so mad at Dwight for insisting that his office is bigger, and Dwight's like, "I got him," But there were some in the deleted scenes. There were some other names that Dwight came up with for that office that Pam and Jim kind of go through.
Okay.
One is Schrute Space, which is actually the name of Dwight's blog. I guess that was on the NBC site. There's Quiet, Dwight Schrute Working, and then Dwight Schrute Privates. So those were like signs that in the deleted scene he had written up and thrown out. He's like, I could do better. But Jim and Pam found like a whole garbage can of them. They were just going through them, which is pretty nice.
Yeah. One thing, so one of the new sections we're going to start bringing up is fireable offenses. So per episode, because there's at least one, maybe not every episode, but most episodes, there's at least one fireable offense. And so Dwight's questioning about medical records, insta fired. Insta. Like, if you had any kind of anything, he would be fired.
Right. So here are some diseases that were submitted to Dwight based on like what you could see on pieces of paper and stuff. You got mad cow disease, Ebola, spontaneous dental hydroplosion, which was like really great.
That was from Pam, yeah.
Leprosy, flesh-eating bacteria, hot dog fingers, and now we're getting into the bits that were said also verbally to him, but we've got anal fissures,
Anal fissures, yep.
government-created nanorobot infection, count choculitis, and inverted penis.
And that's where Meredith asked, could you mean vagina? Because if so, I want that.
And then Dwight naively says, but I thought you had your vagina removed.
Right, and that's something I actually wrote a note about is this really shows, and this is something continuous throughout most of the show, is Dwight's sort of, I don't know if disdain is the right word, but definitely a complete misunderstanding of females. Plus his just complete lack of caring for them.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely has like this kind of archaic, manly man concept of like how society should work. It's not so far that like women shouldn't have thoughts or anything, but definitely like their role in society is like, people he just kind of puts babies in. And like because of that, he doesn't care to understand how women work. And that what
Right.
hysterectomy
And so,
is.
but even then, like if we go down later in the road, they're talking about when him and Angela go to Toby about the senator being gay. It's like how they know which penis will open up and take the other.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So and this is just the start of that, because this is a constant running joke for him for the majority of the show. He's not a dumb guy, but he's sheltered in a weird way. It's not like
Right.
I don't know if sheltered's the right word for it, but he's just like he's just not normal. You
Well,
know?
we find out later too that he was raised on like this Pennsylvania German Dutch farm that's like really separated from society.
Right.
Like he's almost Amish, but not. So, right, like what he's led to believe, like, at one point he says, I think it's this episode, he could raise and lower his cholesterol at will,
Right.
which is like probably not true, but you feel like that's just some ass backwards things that he learned on like the farm,
Yeah, this episode really brings in the I have perfect DNA because I'm a shroot. You
Right.
know, his whole I'm a shroot, and that's right.
And he has that bit like way later where he can make his penis go into his own body. It's also like the beginning of like weird little bodily tricks that Dwight has about himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dwight's a weirdo.
Dwight is a weirdo, but he becomes less so, I think, going down. Like I think we said in the last episode, like Dwight's progression is probably my favorite progression of anyone in the show because it's the most full, I guess is probably the way to say it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I mean, a lot of the because like Jim is really good when it's Jim and Pam, and that's like the storyline. And once that happens, it allows the other characters to grow, and Dwight's definitely one of them that starts to get into his own for sure.
Yeah. But another part of this episode is so Michael pisses everybody off, and he's like, "Okay, I've got a surprise."
Yep.
So he tries to like do the whole ice cream sandwich thing, and he's like, "So we would like to take the troops on your giant ride." It's like, ride? It's a industrial coal elevator that goes 300 feet in the ground.
Right.
And so something like at the very end of this episode, because one thing a lot of the actors I think do really well in The Office is their facial expressions. At the very end of the episode, like Jim is just so pissed.
Yeah.
He's beyond pissed, and it's like he doesn't say a word. He just has this this look about him, like, oh God, I can't believe I trusted you.
Right.
And that's what a lot of them do really well, especially in this episode. Is a lot of them like when they're really upset with Michael, they don't say anything. Like the scene is mostly quiet, but it's just like the look on everyone's faces is just pure disdain for this person.
So, funny thing about that pause, right? Paul Lieberstein at some festival said this quote, that the scene was scripted as, quote, the longest pause in television history. When it was shot, it ultimately went on for 2.5 minutes, so long that Steve Carell broke into a sweat from the awkwardness of the situation. So, I mean, can you imagine, like, you've got a whole crew, plus, like, this really large cast, and they're just staring at you, and, like, you were just told, just be as quiet as you can for as long as you can. Like, because at some point it either becomes funny and it, like, kind of ruins it, or, like, that awkwardness, like, really sets in, and it's just like, this is weird.
Right.
Yeah.
They did such a good job in that particular scene. Like, they sold it without words, They were just like, oh my God, it was just perfect. Like, everyone is upset Michael's trying to be Michael and crack jokes, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah. And generally, too, well, so I'm going to keep bringing up some deleted scenes or whatever, because I personally feel that they're kind of canon. They're just, like, weren't super important, unless, like, they blatantly say something that is mentioned to be false moving forward. But the deleted scene for that ending bit was that Michael says bowling when everybody walks out of the office. So it's just him and the camera crew. Everybody's left, and he goes bowling or whatever, right? Which to me makes it seem like his brain kind of broke when he was being awkward.
Right. Well, he kept trying to think of something to say, and he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So, like, actually, that deleted scene makes a lot of sense for the moment in the episode.
Yeah, I mean, and he was like really reaching. He goes to that travel agent, and he's all like, "Well, it's kind of like an all-inclusive comped bus to Atlantic City." Like he. I mean, I think the thing that The Office does is that a lot of the characters are like really disconnected from reality. Which is something that Michael says about Andy, like in season 3 during the merger. Mm-hmm. He's like, I don't understand how someone could lack self-awareness or whatever it is. And Dwight and Michael both kind of show that here about like how they just don't understand why other people react so weirdly to them,
Right, and I think that's something, especially with Michael, that you started seeing it like he isn't quite connected to everything else. Like, he's not stupid, because a lot of times when people bring this kind of stuff up, they talk about the person being stupid.
Right.
He's not stupid. He's obviously a good person in business, great salesman, but his perception of reality, and I think it is something that will come up later in while we talk, is he is so disconnected from. He has no self-awareness. Like, his view of reality is so different from the actual view of reality. It's really strange.
Yeah. Some like a minor thing that's like retconned. Mm-hmm. In this episode, Dwight says that he's never been sick. Perfect immune system.
Right.
But like later on, it says like he once had pneumonia. He's had kidney stones before. And then during performance review, he also he's late that time. I mean, obviously that's in the future. So up until this point, that's what he's claiming. But obviously, he's kind of a person. He's not this
right.
Yeah, big disease-free wall that he thinks he is.
Yeah, and that's watching the retcons is fun. I enjoy, I think finding those are more fun than watching the actual show at some points.
Yeah.
Because there's some crazy retcons. Actually, we're going to get to one in episode 5, which I think is a really important one. But
yeah, I mean, so we got a couple episodes, I guess. So what would you give? What would you rate this episode?
This episode's really good. It really starts to flesh out the characters. I mean, it's episode 3, so they've had a little bit of time. One thing I have to give them is these guys start to feel like the people we know and love early.
Right.
It starts to feel, Dwight is Dwight, Jim is Jim, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to give this 4 out of 5 inverted vaginas.
That's tough. I'm going to have to agree with you. That's going to be 4 out of 5 flesh-eating robots.
Flesh-eating. Okay.
Yeah.
So our next episode is season 1, episode 4, The Alliance, which is where it's all about the downsizing, and Dwight's really scared, and he's worried about getting let go, and so Jim and Pam decide to play a prank on Dwight, which ultimately backfires. So, good episode.
Yep.
I think it's a really good episode. You get to see a lot of the interaction between Jim and Pam. Like, I think this is the first real episode where you're like, somebody has feelings for somebody else.
Yes. Yeah, because there's some like cute talking head moments, like in the first episode where like Jim knows Pam's favorite yogurt, and Pam thinks that's cute, but it's like separate. But you're right. This is like the first time like they have chemistry, like in person like
but
that.
there's also talking head in this episode where there was a thing where Pam played a prank on Dwight, and it flashes to talking head Jim. He's like, it was all her idea. She's so great, and then you can see him catch himself and look at the camera and go, shit,
right? Yeah,
I screwed up, And I think that was this when you really started to get the idea of this person loves somebody else that he can't have.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what really drives the first three seasons. Yeah, is Jim is doing everything he can not to be with Pam, and then he gets to be with Pam. And I mean, Grant, I don't think that him being with Pam ruins the show. It definitely changes it, but I don't think it ruins it at all.
Right. This Jim also says, "Absolutely, I do," when Dwight offers to be. And which kind of becomes like a line that is said by characters who are agreeing and like.
Well, but it's also the
because Pam says it.
Pam brings it up. Yeah, if I say like Pam is like, Jim always taught me if Dwight asks you to do anything, what you say is absolutely I do.
Right.
And so it's this like nice little tie-in that you don't even realize until like 8 seasons later.
Yeah. Jim says it in season 3, kind of, to Andy when Andy's like fishing around, like who should he date, and then when Andy lands on like Pam, he's like, "What about her?" Jim says something, "Absolutely, you should," something like that. So it's kind of like this like rusy agreement phrasing,
Right. And one thing I found funny about this episode is more because of the time we're living in right now. So if people listen to this podcast 10 years down the road, they'll know exactly what we're talking about. But there's a big Donald Trump reference with Michael. Yeah. He's like, I could never be that guy because his favorite words, "Oh, you're fired."
Right.
I'm just like, oh, that's funny. If you had ever thought that guy'd be like maybe our next president.
Well, and sometimes this is kind of like a look at like, obviously this is an NBC show, right?
Right.
Because there's that in the performance review episode, Dwight says that they have this prank on Dwight where he missed The Apprentice.
Right.
Right. And then the name of the alliance and like a lot of the way that Dwight and Jim talk to each other and even how it's shot is very reminiscent of like Survivor, which is also on NBC.
Right.
So it's like a lot of like, hey, we got other shows, Yeah, that's true. Let's see. The B storyline here, right, is Michael trying to have a birthday party for Meredith.
Right. And I think that was really interesting because you really see a lot of, and it'll be even more so in the next episode, but like Michael's just complete lack of decorum around women.
Right, right.
And also you have, it's also the first reference of the Dundies.
Yes.
Because Dwight says, Meredith Palmer, 2 kids, 2 divorces, et cetera, et cetera. Multiple Dundies winner. So one of the weird things about Meredith is she mentions a second child multiple times, but you never see her. You only see the son.
Right.
So Jake, I think, is his name.
I think so too. Yeah.
It's a J name. So I find that really interesting how like they keep referencing, and at least for the first 4 or 5 seasons, they keep referencing the second child, but you never see him ever.
Right. There's another. It's probably not a mistake. It's probably just something that they added in and they just changed it later. But Jim's quote to Meredith is, "You're an accountant.
Right.
Just fudge the numbers." But she's not an accountant. She's
right.
Supplier relations.
So maybe, yeah, that was something I was wondering about. Like, was she originally supposed to be accountant? They just changed it, or what? I'm not sure.
Because there's like this weird, like there's a bunch of characters in this first season. Characters is the wrong word, but people who work in the office who aren't actually like the cast. Like there's a weird little old lady who is nobody, who's just there for the birthday party. And we just assume she works somewhere in the office. and then she's like never seen again. That Devin guy is around, you know.
Right, but he doesn't get fired until the Halloween
Season
episode
2,
of
yeah.
season 2, right?
So it's just interesting, like, because Creed just as easily could have been one of those background characters, and he ends up becoming, like you said, he's in like almost all the episodes.
It's like 180 of the 200 or something like that.
Yeah, so it's kind of it's interesting in retrospect now to watch all of these old episodes and see all these like, who the hell's that? And they're really just nobody. They're just trying to fill in the space, you know. Right,
and so there's a couple of characters like, especially like Creed, who become something.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's either this episode or the next episode where we meet Daryl for the first time. Like, Daryl has had no spoken lines until like episode 4, episode 5 of the first season. And they go down to the warehouse. I'm pretty sure it's basketball, but
I think you're right. Yeah, you're right. Because, what do you call it? Yeah, and then there's that whole ridiculous, I mean, we'll get there in the next bit, but that whole ridiculous name thing, like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Right.
And like how it's like so far away from Daryl.
Right, but it's funny because I don't know if it's happened yet, but Michael does something similar with Pam, where he like keeps evolving her name over and over again.
Yeah, like Pamela Ding Dong.
Pamela Ding Dong, and all that stuff. Yeah, and so like it's a very nice continuity where you're like, oh, this is just who this guy is.
Right.
That's something I think they do really well, especially early, is like establishing. Establishing who these people are.
Right.
And
I mean, yeah,
they really hold to those molds for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, Jim, Pam, Dwight, and Michael are definitely like the best in terms of early progression. But like right now, we don't know Meredith's the slut, you know?
Right.
And Angela's not as uptight as she becomes.
And Kelly is
Kelly's pretty normal right now.
Pretty normal right now. I mean, she's been like really one episode for the most part.
Right, diversity day.
Right.
Diversity, yeah. Let's see, what other notes do I have about this crazy episode? So I was looking this up, and it was like really weird, and I had to rewatch this bit a bunch. But they, so when Jim is taping Dwight in the box,
right?
So this piece of trivia I saw, and I never saw it in the show before, but it says that there is a animatronic mouse trapped in a mouse trap behind Jim as he's taping Dwight in the box. And I was like, I never saw that before because they wanted it to look like a warehouse or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I rewatched that bit like 10 times, and literally the last time I saw it, and it's only in one shot. It looks like they took away the mousetrap in other shots. But yeah, it's this big fake-ass rat in a mousetrap, and its head is just sideways. It just like flops up and down sometimes. I was like, that's so weird. But if you ever want to watch that scene 20 times, you'll see it there.
One thing that this episode really starts really like, if you weren't getting the vibes they were putting down, like this one just hit you in the face with the whole Jim Pam thing. Mm-hmm. Because, Roy gets really jealous when, Jim is talking to Pam and the whole thing. Like, and there's a certain shot where, like, they leave together and, like, Jim is just super sad about it,
Yeah, it kind of goes back to what I said to you last episode about like the rare times that Jim is on the losing side of things. Because he lost when Dwight made that sale for him, and then here he loses out too because Roy comes in and kind of tough guys him, and it's like super awkward too, right? Because it's at the reception, which is like the front of the whole office. Mm-hmm. So everybody saw it, and what else is he going to do? So the best he can do is kind of stand there awkwardly.
Right. So one of the questions I've always had is, like, is Jim in the right? I mean, granted, he starts dating Katie, into season 1, into season 2, et cetera, but how would you feel about the whole Jim Pam thing?
Well, so that I had this terrible expression I used to say a lot when I was younger, in that you can always score even if there's a goalie, which is not great. But so I don't know. You ever see Chasing Amy?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So it's kind of like this mentality where it's like you still want this thing, even though it seems unobtainable. And it's kind of like this, not to get too crazy social or whatever, but it's kind of like this like perceived like white guy problem that like they can just have things. So Ben Affleck wants to date a lesbian, and then Kevin Smith wrote it, so he ends up dating a lesbian, totally fine. And then Jim too, kind of hoping against hope, He's all like, well, maybe she likes me, And he tries to point out all the times where like they've been engaged for 3 years, I think, at that point or something crazy. And but that being said, I don't think he's wrong. I would do that. And Pam's a damn cutie.
Well, yeah. Yeah, but it's just one of those weird things. Like, we'll get into relationship stuff later that we can really talk about, because there are certain things that happen in this show that's happened to me, et cetera, et cetera. So that'll be interesting. But
because Pam's just as much at fault,
right, and she flirts just as hard,
right.
And so part of it is, and if you read a lot of like the Reddits and stuff, is like Pam is one of the most hated characters on Reddit, because they're like, she's a terrible person because of all the things she did. So I don't necessarily agree with it, but I can see it, because she never knew when to say when. She just let things keep going.
Yeah, I mean, because like you said, now we're going to get real far away from it, right? Now we're talking like seasons later, but it's tough because at the end of season 3, Casino Night, I think it is.
2. That's season 2.
Two. Jim doesn't really need to tell her how he feels, He says it. He says, I need you to know. But he's kind of being selfish in that moment, because he doesn't, and he knows that she's in this thing. And like the nice thing to do would for him to let her make her own decisions. And he kind of dumps this thing on her, which is why I bring up Chasing Amy, because that's also very similar. Happens in the car, and he only does it to make himself feel better and to like give him that chance. But Pam acts correctly in that, like, we can't, So Jim's the weirdo here. If
Right.
Reddit's kind of dislike anybody, we should be disliking Jim. Reddit.
Another thing that I think popped out in this episode was just how, especially sort of the B storyline of the, actually this might also be kind of a retcon, is later in at least season 4, it's shown that Michael knows everyone's birthday, like to the day.
Oh, right.
It especially comes out in Survivor Man, but in this episode, he doesn't know that no one, he doesn't have the same sort of encyclopedic knowledge of his people's birthdays.
Yeah.
And in that episode, it's shown, at least in Survivor Man in season 4, where he's like, he knows everyone's birthday. He's made all the mistakes. He's been doing it forever. So
Right.
it's sort of a weird, I don't know if it's a full retcon, but it's kind of a retcon.
Yeah, I mean, aside from the fact that like definitely all the characters' birthdays probably change a couple of times and like throughout the show for like
Right.
story convenience. Yeah, I feel like that's probably something they add to Michael once they try to get him further away from like that unaware douchey manager and more to that like lovable oaf manager that he kind of becomes toward the end.
Right.
So it's probably most likely more of a retcon maneuver as opposed to like an oversight. But yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, because he definitely becomes a lot more like emotionally involved in all of those people like later on,
Right. And, when he was talking about like all the different things he rejected for Meredith's card, you're like, wow, dude, you have like no,
Right.
connection to reality here.
Yeah, it's true.
So,
Uh,
good.
No, you, please.
I was about to say, what would you give this episode?
I think It's probably not one of the stronger ones of the season. It's a good one, but not so great. So I'm gonna have to give it a 3 out of 4. I didn't have a noun for this one. 3 out of 4 Roy intimidation moves.
Yeah.
3 out of 5. 3 out of 5. Yeah.
3 out of 5. You know, if you had asked me before I rewatched these again for like the 15th time or whatever, I probably would have given a 4 out of 5. But I think I'm at a 3 out of 5. Dwight in cardboard boxes. So, like, it's a good episode, and I remember it more fondly than it actually deserves.
Right. It's, and before we move on to basketball, it is interesting too how much they play up the office closing stuff, like the branch closing. Because like every other episode's pretty much about that.
Right.
Even in basketball, there's like a pretty big reference to the branch possibly closing.
Right.
And it kind of, and also too, there's 20 episodes in the season moving forward, so it's easier to like not have to talk about it all the time. But the first season's pretty heavy with that weighing on people.
Right, and I mean it's a good catalyst for discussion, right? So like you can always push the we're going down into the narrative, and that creates a lot of tension, and that allows people to react off the tension.
Right. All right. So next up, we have basketball, which is the 5th episode of the season. It aired in April 2005, written by Greg Daniels, directed by Greg Daniels.
Yes, Greg Daniels does a lot of episodes.
Yeah.
He does like 20 episodes for The Office.
I haven't looked, but I wonder if his involvement goes down once Parks and Rec goes up. Like, obviously, he's still like the creator of the show, but I wonder like if he started focusing more on Parks and Rec once that show started taking off.
Probably.
But we'll get there. But essentially, kind of one storyline. The office workers upstairs are challenging the warehouse workers downstairs to a basketball game because Michael noticed they had a basketball hoop. And antics ensue.
Yes. Michael being Michael raises the bet too far.
Yep.
So he's like, hey, let's, because...
Daryl says losers buy the winners dinner at wherever.
Yeah,
Script
some
is.
steakhouse.
Yeah.
And Michael's like, no, losers work on Saturday.
Which is a thing because the branches are urged to work on the weekend, and they have to do it, otherwise they'll get closed, yeah.
Might get closed, right?
Yeah.
So this is a good episode. I think it really shows sort of even though they're still in the office, you get to see them outside of their normal business character.
Yeah.
You get to see Jim. He's like, oh, because I don't know. Did you play basketball in high school?
I did.
It's like if you watch John Krasinski, the actor, play, he's played some ball.
Right.
Like some of his moves are like, I was a 4-year starter in high school, and I can't do some of those moves.
Right.
So, you know. And so there's those little things that you may or may not get. So it's like you can tell he's played ball. You get some of the stuff about how you get to see sort of Pam being in both camps.
Yep.
Because she's cheering for Jim, but also cheering for Roy. So that's really interesting. One of the bigger or longer term retcons, I guess. So, and this is jumping to the end of the episode, so we'll come back to it. But Oscar is good at basketball, right?
Kevin.
No, Oscar too. Oscar was shooting through.
Oh, yeah. You're right. Yeah.
But in Happy Hour, which is like season 6 or season 7, he can't shoot for shit. When maybe it's just because he's trying to impress the warehouse worker he's got a crush on.
Maybe he's nervous. Yeah.
It could just be that, but like it's a big retcon. Like, because as good as he was like stroking that ball, like the way he was throwing it in Happy Hour is just a complete retcon.
Well, yeah. I mean, Kevin's the one who lands all those shots in a row.
Right, but Oscar also does hit a couple
like
too. Yeah.
Another funny thing about this episode, especially in context of it being in the same season, is that Michael is still being culturally insensitive.
Yes.
Right? He's
Yes.
like, Stanley, you're our secret weapon, just because he's the black guy. And then he says, Oscar, you're going to be great during baseball season.
Or in or if we
Or in
box.
boxing. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. Actually, yeah, that's one of my notes. But this is also when we start getting into a little bit more backstory about Dwight. Because Michael references Lord of the Rings and Dwight corrects him, and then Michael starts making fun of him. He's like, "Oh, +2 Elven sword."
Right, yeah.
So my question is, because with that is, does Dwight actually play D&D? It wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't shock anybody, but it's never actually said in the show. But I think I would have to say yes, he does play D&D.
Yeah, I think he might. It's tricky because Dwight's character, they fit in a lot to make him seem weird, right?
Right.
So, like, eventually we know that he grew up on this weird farm where he grows beets. He's got this weird Amish cousin named Mose, but he also has a Trans Am that he, like, rebuilt himself or whatever like that. But then also he's into, like, all this, like, nerdy stuff. He likes Battlestar Galactica. He likes Lord of the Rings, you know? So they really kind of chuck in all of this, like, weird nerd stuff. So in terms of how weird he is, I would assume he probably does play D&D. But it's a lot of hobbies for a full-time employed salesman who runs a farm.
Right, but that's it's like season 6 where like things are just going sideways for Dwight. He's like, yeah, I'm doing karate 8 times a week and this. I meditate an hour in the morning at
Right.
sunrise and sunset. So like, yeah, apparently he just doesn't ever sleep.
Right. I mean, he has weekly laser tag.
Right.
Yeah, no, he's a busy guy and he does a lot. But we also know he's popular because he has that weird bit where he brings in all of his friends or whatever.
Popular, like,
Well, not popular, but he's got has outside work acquaintances.
right.
Yeah.
So there
yeah.
was something I kind of wondered it doesn't really affect the show too much, but Michael makes a reference to homosexuality when he's talking about how I wasn't saying gay in terms of sexuality, but bad at sports kind of way.
Oh, right.
And so like part of me is like, in the showrunner's mind, was Oscar already gay?
Yeah, I feel. I mean, we'd have to do some internet sleuthing, but he's gone from that season 3, for a long time, right? He's in Gay Witch Hunt, and then he goes on that sabbatical because it's part of the lawsuit or whatever. It almost makes me wonder if he was like doing another job, the way that people do, So they like made him gay for the storyline because it was funny, and then he was able to leave for a long while to like shoot a movie or something crazy like that.
That's about the time. No, never mind. I was about to say something, but that's not true. Because I know for a while he was doing movies because he was in The Proposal, which is hilarious. If you want a good rom-com, it's a good one. Ryan Reynolds, Sandra Bullock, etc.
Sandra Bullock, she's great. Betty White,
Hey, man. Sandra's the best.
she is. She's great. Yeah, so part of me wonders that. Like, yeah, I feel like, especially because we were talking about, too, like this uncertainty that the show would continue on after. I feel like maybe this is one thing that they weren't necessarily planning.
Maybe so. And especially because they only got so many episodes ordered, and so they might have been trying to sort of tie things up a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's one of those weird things about how shows work, right? Episodes. And so, like How I Met Your Mother, I know the ending a lot of people really hated, but from the very first season, Robin was supposed to be the ultimate goal for Ted.
Right.
And so they just carried it on once they got renewed. But if they were going to be a one and done,
Right.
Ted was going to get with Robin, and she was going to be the mom, you know. So it's always weird to know what they're thinking and like pushing through. Especially because a lot of these writers were there for a lot of years, you know.
Right.
You know, Mindy Kaling wrote a lot of episodes. So did B.J. Novak. So did Paul Lieberstein. I mean, it's like a third of the episodes between the three of them right there.
Yeah. So I have a question for you, buddy.
Okay.
If you were playing basketball against the warehouse staff,
Right.
and you had made a sweet layup on your crush's fiance, and you were walking back to your side of the court, and you see Pam do that lip licking thing she does, I mean, I'd pretty much call a timeout and have to like go take a cold splash of the old sink there, you know?
Right. Yeah. I mean,
That's an instance where like you really see, like, obviously Pam likes Jim in some way and she's flirty or whatever, but this is the first time it's like it's a little bit more like, you know,
really in your face
Yeah.
about it. Yeah, the way Pam is in this episode is really interesting because she swings really hard both directions.
Yeah.
Because she's really cheering on Jim and really cheering on Roy.
Yep.
But the end of the episode, which is one of the more heartbreaking things if you actually watch it, you know, really pay attention to it, is, you know, she's like, oh, we need to go get you in a tub.
Yeah.
To Roy at the very end of the episode. And Jim's like super happy. And then goes, because he was flirting about going to the mall or whatever. And then, you know, she says that, and his entire demeanor just changes. He's just like, oh, you know.
Yeah, I think it's like an interesting instance where, like, because they really only know each other from work, right? There's like a lot that leads me to believe that at least up until this point they haven't seen each other outside of the office, like even for like group events. And it's like this, you know, reality check where it's like, yeah, they're engaged, they live together, and they bang.
Right.
Sometimes in a bathtub. And Jim's like, oh, yeah, that's right. That sucks. Yeah.
Right. And, you know, I don't know if it's this episode or one of the other ones, but, you know, Jim's like, you know, I'm kind of her go-to guy when, you know, there's problems with at work or with Roy. Well, and those are pretty much her only problems.
Right,
you know?
right, yeah.
So I don't remember if it's this episode or not, but, you know, there's that kind of weirdness about the entire relationship. Because, look, we've all, I don't know, maybe not we all, but I would have definitely had crushes on girls I couldn't have.
Sure.
And so I understand the thing, and granted, I got to give Jim credit for the most part. He doesn't try to interfere.
Right.
Which I haven't always been that good. But, you know, so I don't know. It's just a weird thing for me because I've been on both sides of that kind of coin. And so it's a really interesting feeling, I think.
Yeah, I mean, because when I was watching the show, I was in college. And it's like very similar to that. It's like this like close-knit group of people, and you kind of everybody knows everybody, and it's just like maybe you like this person but she's dating a friend of yours, or you know, whatever,
Right.
which way it is. So we've definitely all been in a situation where it's like, I don't know, you know, and especially, you know, they have the office with Roy having to be downstairs, but like when we were younger, you know, we had like everybody's aim chatting each other, you know, like, you know, oh, your boyfriend's giving you trouble, you know, what's going on? And you know, but yeah, we get to see it here like in person, and it's a little tough for Jim. But I also feel too like legitimately Pam feels that Jim's her friend, you know.
Right.
So even though she has these feelings, she's okay with like keeping him there. It's terrible, and I don't like to use the phrase, but it's a little friend zoney, you know. Like she gets the best out of Jim without, you know, having to give the whole shebang. But Jim gets just as much out of that relationship too, you know.
Right. And, you know, we'll start to see that sooner, like things changing in the next episode.
Yeah.
But, okay, so there's one play in the basketball game where Roy throws an elbow into Jim's face.
Yes.
Was that an intentional foul?
It's tough because in the context of the game, Jim was being a little bit more aggressive on Roy. Mm-hmm. At that point, he had he scored on Roy twice pretty cleanly, and Roy obviously is a temperamental guy. And then the last time, he does this like elbow shimmy and knocks Roy onto his behind. So probably it was probably very intentional. Yeah.
Right. Especially coming off the alliance, you're like, well, maybe he's just like trying to show him who's boss because
Yeah. They do have like a weird apology moment though in the beginning of the game, where man, I wish I had written that down. But Roy's like, "Hey man, sorry about whatever happened the other day, but I'm glad that she's got someone up there to talk to because
Right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
So, yeah, but it's still in like the back of Roy's mind because he's an angry guy,
And this was a bit before like shows really went full continuity, but I feel like they do, for the most part, they do a good job with continuities.
Yeah. I will say there was a interesting tidbit I found out when I was reading about this episode that elbow was written into the script, but the one that was shot and kept in was actually an accident. Because Greg Daniels had them just play basketball and kind of like be their characters.
Right.
And he just kept in the good bits. Because there's a lot of things that have no story element, right? Like all the times Michael's trying to make 3-point shots.
Right.
Or, Dwight stealing the ball from Ryan. I think those were just like, what would Dwight do? So he steals the ball from his own teammate, So that elbow was actually unintentional. But John Krasinski, is that how you say his last name? Krasinski?
Yeah.
Actually gets elbowed in the face there, which is pretty great.
Yeah, that's why it looked so good on camera because it was natural. It just accidentally got popped.
Yeah. And then one more fun fact: Brian Baumgartner, who plays Kevin, he actually made 14 shots in a row. I think they only keep in like 5 or so. He's like kind of going around the key.
Right.
But when they were shooting it, he made 14 shots.
Wow. That's cool.
Actually, I think what happened was he was just shooting, and then he kept making shots. So they're like, shoot this. And then, so whatever they shot was like what was left after that. So that's kind of
nice. So what are you going to rank this episode?
It's tough. I feel like the out of 5 system here is failing me. So I might have to go to a 0.5 thing here. But I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of 5 free throw shots. And what I'm going to do moving forward is when I take notes, I'm going to add in my...
I've been meaning to actually do that.
Here.
But,
Yeah.
So I'm going to give this 4 out of 5 bird baths out of the sink.
That's fair. Yeah. Yeah, that was some unfortunate visuals, huh? You see like skinny, pasty BJ Novak kind of showering his armpits there. Yeah.
Stanley.
That's a tough one.
All right. So we're on to our last episode, Hot Girl.
The last episode of the season.
The last episode of the season.
Not meant to be, but it was aired last, right? Because I'm looking at the production codes here. It was 11:02.
Right. Yeah. It was 11:02, so it was supposed to be the second episode, but it ended up not being the last episode or first
Right.
second episode.
But essentially, what happens in this episode is the office gets this weird out of office sales rep who comes in and is trying to sell purses to the ladies in the office. And I thought it was kind of weird, right? Because like she comes in, but she's there for the whole day. She sets up shop in the conference room. She's got all her bags laid out. And throughout the day, all the different people in the office kind of go in and check out the different things. And she's talking to them. And some people are a little bit more receptive. Some people aren't. But it's like you feel like at some point, people just know. Like they come and they're like, oh, yes, I would like this bag. Or no, I wouldn't like this bag. Like she shouldn't really have to set up shop for the whole day. So that was kind of weird that she's there for so long. But obviously it allows Michael to have this really weird interaction with her as he keeps visiting her throughout the day,
Right. But I think part of that would be that maybe she was trying to get other people from the office park to come down to her.
Right. Not just under Mifflin, right?
Not just under Mifflin. But this is Amy Adams,
Yep.
who is a huge star now, obviously. She's been in multiple Disney movies, was in Superman movies, a huge star.
I think she had done a couple of bit parts like this.
Right.
Like around this time. Yeah.
They had the producer said that they realized how big of a star she was going to be. They would have kept her in the show. They would have figured out some way to like keep her in the show.
I mean, because she's seen kind of in and out of season 2.
Right. She was in at least
All the way till Booze Cruise.
Right, but she was in at least 3 episodes.
Yeah, I mean, she's there for the fire.
She's there for the fire.
Maybe that's it. And Booze Cruise.
Booze Cruise.
Yeah.
Right, and they reference her in when everyone goes to Jim's house,
Yes.
but she's not seen.
Right. Right, which is before Booze Cruise.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
And so you get the idea that they're not doing so great.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he definitely. I think he probably does like her, and not to be mean to this character or anything, but there probably is a similarity for him that Pam, with like a Pam comparison. So like this is like a nice Pam alternate.
Right.
So I probably early on in that relationship it was okay, especially because by the fire they seem okay.
Well, I mean,
But like you said, during House Party they were kind of rocky.
yeah.
Oh, but your hesitation reminds me. That's right, because she likes weird movies that Jim and Pam make fun of.
Right.
Yeah.
Not weird movies, terrible movies.
Terrible movies.
Right.
I forget what they are. I have to be careful because she might mention
It's
a movie
like
that my
Legends of
girlfriend
the
likes.
Fall, Legally
Oh, sure.
Blonde.
Yeah, I can't make fun of Legally Blonde. I'm not allowed to.
So, fun thing about this episode is even though Michael is born and bred not too far outside of Philly, because that's where Scranton is, like an hour and a half from Philly,
Right.
he's a Pirates fan, which is a Pittsburgh team, which is where I live, which is like 5 hours away from Scranton, 6 hours away.
Right.
He's because he at the beginning of this episode he's talking to Jan, and she says something about Alan. And he's like, "Oh, tell Alan that the Mets suck. Go Pirates!"
Yeah.
It's like,
Let's go Pirates.
yeah. It's just like, really, like it seems like an odd thing. It's like he should be a Phillies fan. He should be.
Yeah. But maybe it's like close enough though. I mean, we have Jersey. We always get stuck having to root for New York teams. So it's like Jets and Giants, but we do have the Devils. So I don't have to
Right,
root for the stupid Rangers.
But the thing is maybe they were just doing it to contrast because Jim is a huge, Phillies fan. He's
Yeah,
a Sixers fan. He is a Phillies fan. He's a, all the teams. He's a Flyers fan, Eagles fan. Even though they don't really talk much hockey.
I wonder too if this is Michael pretending to like sports, because generally he's a pretty unmanly man.
That's true. I had thought about that. Maybe he's just like,
Right. This is
goading
this
somebody.
thing he could fake with whoever the hell he's talking about. Yeah. So let's see. What are some interesting interactions that people have with Hot Girl, Katie? Dwight goes in there.
right. I want
He's trying to make a move on
we'll get to that. I don't think we're
Okay.
ready for that. But like a couple of times in my notes, I've just written poor Katie because like the way Michael treats her is
Yeah.
so terrible. I feel so bad for her. And she's like doing all she can to not get pulled in.
Well, that's what's super sad is because you feel like she's definitely had this experience before, right? She's just like chronically, like obviously she's attractive, and she just has these like really weird dudes hitting on her all the time.
Right.
Especially if like consistently she sets up shop in a place for like a day and can have them like regularly visit her,
Right. But even then, like it seemed like Michael was a stretch too far for her. She's like, just please leave me alone.
Yeah.
Uh,
There's that great bit where Ryan's helping him clean out his car.
Yes.
He's like, how many fish fillets do you eat?
Yeah, and then and it also brings in Night Sweat, this perfect smell like,
That's right. That's right.
which gets brought up 3 or 4 more times
Yeah.
in the run of the series. So I wonder who was at the Rite Aid trying to find something and saw just that tag, a perfect smell like for this. And it's like, hey, I'm going to write this into an episode.
Well, you know what else too, and I was going to. I should have brought it up during the Alliance, it's the Alliance. This whole season, they do hint to us that Michael's kind of broke all the time.
Right.
You know, he because eventually he has to declare bankruptcy, and he's like super broke. And I had always kind of wondered and never really thought about it if he just like became irresponsible with money, or if he always kind of was. And this season, he's got a lot of issues with money. In the Alliance, he over donates to Oscar and has to tell him to cash a check on Friday when they get paid.
Right. Well, I think he was always bad with money, but Jan moving in and then spending more money is what caused him to go, full go broke,
Yeah, see, because part of me too always wondered if that was a legitimate thing. Like, did Jan really spend that much money? Because then when Oscar goes through that that list of things that Michael bought, he does buy like a lot of garbage,
Right.
So I mean, I'm sure Jan didn't help, especially being unemployed, but he was definitely not doing like super swell, especially by buying knockoff smells.
And I think that also in this episode is where you really start to see the antagonism towards Toby.
Yeah,
Because he's like, showing Katie around. He's like, this is Toby. And they they're friendly. He's like, he's been divorced. He's got a
Right.
kid. And, da.
yeah.
Like, it's the first time you really see Michael be like anti-Toby. Even
Yeah.
though that becomes like a trope for the show is how
Right.
much everyone hates Toby.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually, most people don't hate Toby, but it seems like people in management positions hate their HR reps. Because, like, when Jim is manager for a day.
That reminds me. So in this episode, when Michael says to put Katie in the conference room,
Right.
Angela or Pam says there's an HR meeting
Yeah.
in there. I'm like, Toby's the only HR person in the building.
Right.
Is he just like jerking
Yeah.
off in there? Like, what is he doing?
That's a good point. Well, maybe I wonder if it's like a conference call.
Maybe. Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good point. I mean, again, it just seems like everybody's particular roles is kind of loosely defined up until like later when it's like said,
Right.
Because there's a bit where, so Michael obviously doesn't like Toby, right?
Mm-hmm.
During Survivor Man, Jim is the manager for the day, and he starts to not like Toby. And then David Wallace talks to Jim, I think it's the job when he's interviewing for that position at corporate.
Right.
And he says something before it kind of like fades out that Jim needs to talk to, I think his name is Kendall or something, the HR guy at corporate. But David Wallace says something like, he's not so nice or he's not so great or whatever.
Right.
So it seems like generally Dunder Mifflin HR representatives are not well received by anybody.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, HR is HR. Most of what Michael does in this episode would get him fired. He would get sued so hard from an outside vendor for the way he treats Katie.
Yeah.
Is so forward about trying to like bone her.
Right.
And then speaking of, you have the whole Dwight boner,
Yeah.
which is never ever want to see again. Like that scars me for life.
Yeah, but he buys a bag.
He does buy that.
He gives
That is
thumbs up at the
maybe
end.
the best bit from the entire episode when
Yeah.
he's in there talking to her and Jim is narrating the encounter to Pam. It's like, oh yes, I'll be the prettiest girl of them all. That is so like classic scene right there.
I mean, so what do you think of it as like a season closer?
I mean, if you didn't know it was the end of the season, you wouldn't know, right?
Yeah.
Except like the only like real definitions are Michael kind of loses and the whole Jim Katie thing starts going,
Right.
And so, watching everything up until this point, you're like, oh, Jim and Pam, right?
Right.
But in this episode, you're like, well, maybe not Jim and Pam. Maybe Pam is destined to live her life or whatever. And yeah, so it's a
Yeah, I mean, it's like I wonder then maybe if they had aired them in the production lineup, because what was the last production code? We got basketball's 04, the Alliance is 03, health. I think maybe healthcare was supposed to be. Yeah, healthcare was 05.
is 05.
Because that might have been, at least in context of the show as a whole, a more appropriate ending note. Because like we're left with like this corporate decision and Thunder
Super
Mifflin's in a rut.
melancholy,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that would make more sense. I think that Hot Girl definitely filled that void
Yeah.
in a lot of respects because you're just like, oh, like Jim's moving on. Jim has moved on, right?
Right.
Because especially the first, these 4 episodes we've been talking about tonight is really builds the Jim Pam narrative, right?
Yeah.
You see the relationship and what it is and how it grows, and then soon you're gonna get Office Olympics and the Dundies and everything else. So I think this is a really interesting like break off point for
Right.
the show. It really it adds this whole other element where early adopters of the show were like, oh my god, no, Jim, don't do this shit. Come on, man.
Well, yeah, and throughout season 2, though, it does give Pam, it like gives Pam's side of the whole jealousy story, where she's forced to sit there and watch like Kate and Jim go away.
It's something like when Jim says he's going to see Katie this weekend,
Right.
like she gets super angry about it,
Yeah.
and it's very visible on her face. Some other fun things. This is the first reference to Michael's futon, which he has until Jan moves in.
Yeah. Well, because technically, because we never see where Michael lives until he moves into the condo.
Correct.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's great. What else do we got here? If there's anything else, it was written by Mindy Kaling as a, by the way.
Right. Yes, written by Kelly. She writes some of the best episodes.
Yeah, she does. Yeah. Have you ever? I never watched the Mindy Project.
It's good.
It's good. Yeah.
It got
It's-
weird, and so I kind of quit watching it. But it's the first 2 seasons are hilarious.
Yeah. It's a Hulu exclusive for streaming, and I don't have Hulu, so
You should get on Hulu, man. It's
I might
worth
get
it.
though. Yeah.
Especially now they have the commercial-free version.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So what are you going to rate this episode?
This one, I think I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5 fish fillets. And I'm going to say, too, that generally speaking, I don't know if I'll ever, well, maybe like later, post-season 5, I might start to go below 3. But I could already foresee that moving forward, a lot of these at the least are going to be 3.5, but everything might be higher.
Yeah. I will give it. This is a really good episode. 4 out of 5 night sweps.
Nice.
So yeah, but it's gonna be until at least into season 3 before I start giving something below a 3 out of 5.
Yeah. So, in terms of this season as a whole, out of all of the seasons of The Office, what do you think?
It's hard to judge it because it's so short.
Yeah.
And it's the beginning, and they definitely don't have a lot of money. But I think it's good. It's better than season. Oh, is that true? I'm trying to think because I used to really hate on season 5 and 6, but the more I rewatch them, the more I like them.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna say it's probably like 5th best season.
Okay.
Because season 8 was there. If it wasn't for the Florida episode, season 8 would be really meh. The
Right.
Florida episode just redeemed that season so hard because they're so good.
Yeah, season 4 was kind of rough. Like I said, when Jim and Pam got together, I felt like the show was kind of trying to figure out what to focus on next. So that was kind of rough. And then I just have that last season, what they do to Andy is just inexcusable. It's very difficult for me to watch. But so yeah, you're probably right. Probably top 4, top 5 seasons out of the whole show.
So, what will you give this season?
I would give this season Yeah, I'd probably stick with a 3 out of 5 rats in a trap.
I will give it 3 out of 5 Dwight's boners.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yep. Well, if it's got to be done, it's got to be done. I get
It's
it.
got to be done. Right. So, thank you. I mean, I think we're pretty much done, unless there's anything else you want to
No,
bring
that
up.
sounds.
Yeah?
Yep.
So, again, we are part of the Broken Jars Broadcasting Network, brokenjars.xyz. We have the Dresden Files podcast, 42 Entertainment, High Fantasy, if you're into writing, Shylock's Gaming, which Jay Rey is a part of.
Yep.
Jay Rey is going to start a new podcast on the network soon about like nerd culture, which will be fun. Broken Jars Pod on Twitter, Broken Jars Broadcasting at Gmail, all that good stuff. So please come out, tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like, everything else, all that good stuff. So just please hit us up.
Yep. Even tell us what you like about the episodes that we have or are going to talk about. Because we could bring up some of that stuff, We care.
Sure.
We care what you guys think.
Exactly. So y'all have a good night or good morning or afternoon whenever you're listening to it. So bye.
Bye.